Hi, Tim. Really a warm welcome to the OSHA conversation. Tim, you're the CEO of Ocean Outdoor. We have had many opportunities to interact with you. You have also addressed the Outdoor Advertising Convention a couple of years ago. It's a great honor to once again have you with us. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you very much for having me, and I send all my my wishes and fond wishes to everybody in India, and I wish you all well through this difficult time. And I feel very privileged to have been invited to take part in this video conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. So we'll straight away get into our conversation, and we know that how year 2020 played out. It was one of the most challenging periods for OH business around the globe, and with national lockdowns and various restrictions that were imposed on people movement, it would surely have had a very big impact on the OH business. Ocean Outdoor also apparently recorded a loss in the year 2020, but at the same time you made some very important media investments as well. So how do you look at the business recovery here on?
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I think our overall revenues were down 38% for 2020 across the entire group, and we ended up break even. You know, we had to take a lot of emergency measures on that journey, and from shorter working weeks for our people, government schemes that we took participate in, cancelling all costs, engaging with our landlords to get relief on some of our agreements, etc. Strong management of working capital. You know, we had to raise some debt via the government scheme for our liquidity. So anything you could do, we did. But I think we always did it with one eye on the future, and so we never cut to the bone in such a way as we thought it would stall our recovery, which I'm pleased to say the United Kingdom is at the beginning of that recovery now, and probably the Nordics and the Netherlands are maybe 3 or 4 weeks behind the sort of positive sentiment we're seeing in the UK. But in terms of investment, we did a number of things. We decided that we would continue to invest in new contracts and new products, and we didn't cancel all capital expenditure. If we thought the product or the project was going to be incrementally valuable when things returned, we continued to invest in those assets. We had a strong concentration on new contract wins, so making sure that we weren't having conversations with landlords where we were over aggressive, where we thought we could win new assets and still build the business. So I think we found a good balance. I think probably the areas that we spend a lot of our time focused on are those areas that are we think will have a greater importance as people return out of home. So whether it is technology advancements such as haptics technology, which is a touch-free, touchless technology for screens, which you use on your mobile devices. We developed that so people can move and interact with our screens without having to touch them in public space. We spent a lot of time building our content portfolio for live events that return to the medium. Wimbledon, the Euro Football Championships, the Champions League, you know, to name but a few, the Olympics, the Olympic Games in Tokyo. All of these events will be broadcast live on our full motion screens across actually not just the United Kingdom, in some of our other markets as well, which is exciting because people are going to be out of home and they're restricted from going to these sports in a different way in 2021. Right. So actually it's an important engagement for our screens and our assets, and important service that we're providing just beyond the advertising service. So we're quite excited about that. You may have seen, or if you haven't already, I'm sure you will in the coming weeks, the force perspective technology, which is a digital production technique which we're using on Piccadilly. You've seen it come out of Korea, where things come out of the screen and
Yes.
create a spectacular 3D illusion. And other things like that we've invested in. You can see from that, just that short answer to the question, we've tried to invest in those areas we think will have greater resonance as audiences return out of home, because we think brands are going to want to rebuild that relationship in an out of home environment and try and have a deeper relationship with the medium as things return to normal.
Fantastic. I think they're great measures. And Ocean Outdoor is the premier digital out-of-home media operator with iconic media assets in the UK. And you've got strong presence in markets like the Netherlands, Nordics, Germany, and other places. Tim, are you really seeing with all these measures that you've taken and generally the way the digital out-of-home media is expanding in very many ways, do you see brands really, a greater number of brands really opting for advertising on digital out-of-home assets, or because of the economic pressures, are they really pushing their spends on conventional media? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, there are two sides to that question. There is, pre the vaccination program in the middle of the pandemic, and post the vaccination program. So just to talk about pre, as you would have seen from our financial results, revenues down 38%,
right?
And I think the revenues in the United Kingdom were down 45%. I remember Q2 last year, digital out of home. It's easy to switch on the message, but it's very easy to switch it off as well.
Right.
So revenues declined, sort of 75, 80%. Back in Q2 last year. So that's the first thing that happened, obviously, because we were in the middle of a pandemic and government was forcing people to stay at home. I think as the years emerged, based on varying degrees of lockdown in different countries, you saw the immediate, don't go out of your home no matter what, became, people would venture out, vehicular traffic started to rebuild. Pedestrian footfall in certain areas started to rebuild just naturally without people having much purpose because they're restricted about what they could do. But vehicular audiences sort of bottomed out around about 65 to 70% of normality. I've no idea where people were going, but they were out there. And I think as the audiences returned, certainly very loyal advertisers to out of home returned alongside those audiences. And we did see what we thought was a recovery in Q3 last year before we went into the final and the most difficult lockdown, which was announced kind of November, December time in the UK. And I think the difference this time as we've emerged is we're now seeing interest from all the brands that are loyal to the medium, but actually increasingly it's all brands from all categories are all leaning back in now that they can see two things. One, they can see that we have got very low deaths and hospitalizations. We have a huge proportion of the UK population inoculated at 75%, and we have a roadmap to coming out of the lockdown. So in the UK, on the 12th of April, we opened non-essential retail. On the 17th of May next week, we opened full hospitality, not just outdoor hospitality. And then on the 21st of June, all being well, all restrictions will be lifted. And you see a spike in bookings on each of those tent poles of announcements. So the first uplift we got was the 12th of April. There's a strong demand from the 17th of May, and then demand goes again from the 21st of June, and then it builds from there. But the Nordics are, I think, around about 38% of their populations are vaccinated, and the Dutch, it's about 35%. Germany is close to 40%. Once you get to 40% of your population vaccinated, you see a big shift in business confidence, advertising confidence, and brand confidence. That's the first thing that happens, and that happened in the UK about 4 weeks ago. It happened in the Nordics last week, and we expect it to happen in the Netherlands over the course of the next 2 weeks. And I think what we're seeing is, and I know from your question you asked about the different engagement with the different formats. It's a very good question because there is a stark contrast. So last year, small formats, broadcast campaigns, smaller format digital 6 sheets, bus shelters, freestanding units, those sorts of environments where you can get mass coverage, but it's a relatively cheap cost per thousand option. It's a cheap coverage option. Those formats did very, very well throughout the pandemic. Did very well for the government's messaging for stay at home or social distancing, etc. And that was the same all year. What we're seeing now is something that's slightly different. I think you're starting to see, and this is across all of our markets, very high demand for high impact, big brand exposure sorts of campaigns. The IMAX in London, which is the largest advertising location in Europe, really, really well sold towards the back end of this year. You're seeing demand increase significantly for Piccadilly. We've got 2 giant spectacular banners in Stockholm, which are also highly demanded. So I think you're seeing a shift now of brands wanting to make a statement in these moments of liberation and euphoria as countries come out of imprisonment and populations become free again. I know it's very difficult in India at the moment, but your time will come as well. And I think those are hopefully they're kind of unique moments in history when brands want to be part of that. And I think people have now realized that when people do return out of home, when you pass these milestones, they come out in droves. And not only do the audiences return dramatically back to 100%, simultaneously, people want to spend more time out of home as well. So you've got the audiences back, but the share of people's time increases as people try and make up for a lost time. And we're seeing that throughout our business now. For example, Westfield, where we have a lot of large format digital screens in Westfield London and Westfield Stratford, their footfall has increased by 70% from when they opened outside of the last lockdown. And it doesn't matter which retail you're in, whether you're a sports brand, just a value fashion brand, high-end fashion, luxury goods, you name it, all of those businesses are having very, very, very strong retail sales in the physical space now, and in some cases better than they were in 2019.
Oh,
so
really?
And this is the sort of pattern that you start to see as countries emerge. I mean, I saw a statistic the other day. They reckon that 9% of all consumer spending in the United Kingdom was in people's bank accounts. So that's 130 billion of expenditure to be spent sometime between now and one would assume the end of 2022. So there is a strong positivity in the UK at the moment. That's reflective of business and advertising. And I think brand is key as people return out of home, and we're seeing that pattern. And probably the UK is leading the recovery in Europe, and Northern Europe is coming up on the rails very, very strongly over the next few weeks.
Wonderful. I think the way this recovery is taking place in the UK could be a stellar example for a lot of markets in other countries as well. And
yeah, I mean, you are seeing similar patterns in the US as well as the UK. Obviously, as you can tell from my tone, this is probably the most positive I've been able to be for 15 months. We hope there's no strain or something that unforeseen for the pandemic that we've not calculated. But I think that the data fact now is that a combination of a significant proportion of your population inoculated, combined with a roadmap that business can plan around of removal of people's restrictions on their free movement, equals business confidence, and advertising in our business follows those factors.
Absolutely. Tim, I want to ask you another question that's slightly different from something that's completely ocean focused. Is in the time of following the national lockdowns that were enforced and various other restrictions that were placed by the various civic bodies on people movement, necessarily OH business was impacted by that because there weren't any audiences in the outdoor space. So to that extent, were there any collective initiatives taken by the OH media operators in the UK to seek some kind of support from the government?
Yes. Short answer, yes, there were. There were a number of initiatives, both advertising and at the macro level from an advertising perspective, and there were initiatives taken by the industry as a collective, and of course there were individual initiatives that were taken by individual companies. But if I give you some examples of ones that happened in turn, so not all of these have been successful, but some of them I think will have some success. There was a collaboration between all the media bodies, not just out of home, cinema, out of home, commercial radio, commercial television, to campaign to the government to issue tax credits for the recovery, so that advertising investment was seen as an investment and was tax deductible from corporation tax, to try and help the recovery. That's with the British government as we speak. It's quite a bold plan, but that was a collaboration between all of the industry bodies from all of the traditional media, if you like. Okay. The second one would be specific to the out of home media, was quite a concerted campaign to engage with government around business rates, because you have a situation where a shop that sits on a piece of land that is closed for business can claim business rates relief, whereas a digital screen or a billboard has still got to pay business rates, even though our audience has been taken away from us. So in that regard, we would say that we're the same as a retailer. We're selling advertising from our digital screenshot window. Absolutely. Somebody else is selling. So we have engaged, and that one is probably still live as we speak. We haven't had any relief as yet, but we're still lobbying. Okay. Yeah. Then I think the industry has benefited from a couple of other things. Obviously, furlough schemes to help all business that we've been able to participate in. I think that's quite key. And I think the one area certainly last year, as I mentioned earlier, which has I think benefited the medium twofold, is the government was a big investor in the medium last year, for public service messaging, public broadcast messaging on screens on the street. It was very important. They didn't matter whether it was a small format bus shelter or a big announcement on Piccadilly. They invested a lot in the medium, and of course that kept some businesses going. But I think off the back of that, I think that's been very positive for the medium, because I think it's been shown to be very powerful, and a very powerful communications platform for delivering very difficult messages at a difficult time. And I think that will be very beneficial to the medium going forward, because there's a huge amount of trust being built around our medium. And what medium can have its audience switch off and still communicate with everybody?
Absolutely. Yes.
So because a lot of those messages and images were broadcast all over the world, whether it's the Queen's speech on Piccadilly, whether it's really important medical messages that were issued on freestanding digital 6-sheets. A lot of these images appeared in national newspapers, online, etc. So the medium remained very relevant.
Great. I think this is quite a multi-pronged approach that you had taken, and I really hope that the industry gets its due in terms of the relief that I think you all have lobbied for. Coming back to Ocean, Tim, I just wanted to also talk about the live events, because when we see your iconic assets. There's a lot of live action that is also broadcast from there. how is that, now that live action would have come down quite dramatically in these last many months, how much has that impacted your business?
Yeah, I mean, for us, really, I think Ocean's always taken some of our assets in certain territories, certain countries are situated in areas where you have a lot of people congregate, pedestrian-based areas in city centre environments where people, people work, shop and play. So
Right.
you get large congregations of people with a high amount of dwell time to spend time with the screen in that environment. So I think we've always felt as though our screens can give something back to the community rather than just push advertising to them all the time. So what we had to do during the pandemic was we just had to be more innovative. So that content would stretch from I suppose community messaging based content to support the government messaging, supporting local heroes, supporting local business, creating motivational content for people to keep going. One example would be we worked with the National Gallery where we displayed famous art pieces all of our screens, because obviously all the art galleries and all the museums were struggling for business. They were all closed, but we could still display famous artwork all over our screens, which is another form of content, putting a smile on people's faces, or at least giving them something to engage with in these sort of dark times. And then, I mentioned earlier, as some of these live events emerge, things like the Tokyo Olympics, for example, we'll be showing highlights on our screens. We actually still did countdown to the Olympics, showing Olympic heroes in the run up to Tokyo Games, even when it was debatable as to whether it was going to go ahead. So we constantly try to innovate and try and make sure the screen is part of its community, way above and beyond just an advertising platform.
Right, and I think you're really associated with a lot of big causes as well, right, along the way.
Yeah, good causes.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. And we had a big campaign across all of our countries to support small businesses in the Nordics, the Netherlands, and the UK, which was very popular, where we donated positive messaging on our screens for businesses that were worse off than Ocean. We did a huge amount with various charities and other bodies that were struggling around the pandemic, be they places like the Marine Conservation Society, mental health issues, race relations, any of these underlying social challenges that are an unintended consequence of lockdown. We were very active in that area in trying to promote a positive tone for all of our countries, actually.
Right. Tim, in the last, if I can say, in the last 2 to 3 years, or maybe a little more, Ocean had really expanded its market presence with acquisitions and a number of other measures by which you expanded your media offerings and your market presence as well. Do you see that happening in the next 1-2 years? Are you going to keep up that momentum, or would you consolidate the business that you have?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think we had huge momentum towards the end of 2019. We acquired 3 businesses in the Netherlands, 2 businesses in the Nordics. We continue to invest in our portfolio in the UK. In fact, we just announced this week a new contract win in Edinburgh St James, which is going to be the equivalent of Westfield for the capital of Scotland here in the United Kingdom. So we don't see ourselves standing still, be it in the environments that we're in, the markets that we're in, or expanding further afield into other geographies. In actual fact, we have expanded quite a lot across all of the Nordics countries during this period, because the businesses we acquired were very strong in Sweden, and we've got a much wider contract base now across Denmark and Norway as well. Germany is only a very small part of our portfolio, and I'd like to think there are bigger opportunities in that particular market. But I think really the next 6 months, I think I would say for all out-of-home businesses that are in recovery, is all about getting your turnover and your advertising and getting your core business back on track, and then taking advantage of opportunities along the way. But I think the next 6 months is a real focus on making all the businesses that we invested in pre-pandemic really running at full speed. That's our focus at the moment.
Fantastic, and wish you all the best for that. Tim, my final question. You mentioned about haptics technology, but there's another thing that Ocean Outdoor has been doing, which is on applying neuroscience-based studies to understand the audience behavior. And in many of your studies and reports, you have pointed to greater audience engagement when it comes to digital out-of-home media. But now, of course, the circumstances have changed. Since you are very focused on such a neuroscience-based studies to understand audience patterns, are you seeing any distinct change in the audience patterns now, post this pandemic, or are you expecting any dramatic shifts in the coming year or two?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing to say is that there is at the moment definitely, and has been, of course, significant changes in audience behaviour and audience patterns of behaviour, obviously because of the pandemic and everything that we just discussed. But I do get asked the question a lot about will the audience return, and how are you going to cope with the fact that you're not going to have the same audience, and those kind of negative questions. I look at it in this way, which is, I think 100% of the audience is going to return. So the audience, the number of people you can reach in our medium, be it in the UK, the Netherlands, Nordics, be it in the United States, North America, be it in India, China, it doesn't matter where we are in the world, globally, the audiences are going to return to the levels they were pre-pandemic. And I think certainly during 2021 and 2022, subject to the health challenge each country has, people are going to spend more time out of home when they are released from the health challenge and being locked down and restricted. So that's good news. But I think you also have to overlay the fact that the audience distribution is going to be different. So different times of day will deliver your peak audience. And if will people work from home more? Yes, but it might mean that some companies have got people working from home on certain days and other days. For digital out of home, this is the beauty of digital out of home, because if the peak audience is on a Thursday, we can sell you Thursday. If the new big night out is a Wednesday, we can sell you Wednesday. If people who haven't traveled into the city to work on a Friday, they're going to travel in on Saturday to shop or go to dinner or whatever it might be. So I think all the audience returns. In the next 18 months, I think they return and they spend longer out of home. But I think the peaks and troughs of our audiences will be redistributed, and some of the patterns of the delivery of that audience will change. Now, I think the interesting thing which you've asked the question about is more around the impacts and the effects and the neuroscience nature of things. There was a study done in Q3 last year, led by JC Decaux in this country, and they monitored some of the early brands that returned when we came out of the first lockdown last year, and they measured their obviously their exposure to out of home and the effectiveness and brand impact scores, etc. And all of those scores were through the roof. They were 30 to 40% better coming out of lockdown than they were previously.
Oh,
and if you think about it, some of it does stand to reason, because the consciousness and people's spatial awareness and how alert you need to be out of home, the importance of consuming what's around you and taking in what's around you in your environment. People are really, really finely tuned to that in a way that perhaps they'd taken for granted in the past. And I think that's again, that's good news for our medium. So we are going to be doing a post-pandemic study and a neuroscience study. What we have launched is something called At the Local, which is a 2,000 base study in the UK. We've extended it to the Nordics and the Netherlands, and it's 1634 audiences concentrated on changing habits and their views about what they will do post-pandemic, how their habits might change, how they're feeling about things, etc. And we ask them a series of questions on an ongoing basis. And there's some quite interesting things coming out of that study. But all of it points to the broader point that I'm making, which is about audience returning 100%, spending more time with our medium, being more engaged and more alert and in tune with our medium, but the distribution of those audiences by day part or by day of week may change in the new normal.
Great. I think this is a great positive message for businesses everywhere. I would mean the out-of-home businesses everywhere, because there are definitely underlying fears in certain markets which are very badly impacted by the current pandemic. And of course, I would also look forward to reading up on the insights that are drawn from the particular study that you have undertaken. So, Tim, it's been fantastic talking to you this afternoon. Great insights, great messages for the industry. And let me wish you and Ocean Outdoor the very best for the current year and for many more years to come. Thank you so much once again for having this conversation with Media for Growth.
Thank you, and good luck to Media for Growth. Good luck to Outdoor Asia. And of course, all our thoughts and best wishes are with the people of India at this moment as well. And thank you for asking me on.
Thank you so much, Tim.